Welcome to Windows on the World, bringing you cutting-edge news, empowering information, and no conspiracy theories. On tonight's show... So Paul Webster has been doing some research into negotiable instruments, a thing that affects us all, and also a thing called the Bills of Exchange Act, which I'm familiar with, have had some success in using, and Paul seems to have taken this to a new heights. So Paul Webster, welcome to Windows on the World.
Thank you very much, Mark.
Well, we had a chat previously, Paul, and we've been meaning to talk for a while.
Yeah.
Just tell us a bit how you started getting into this information.
Well, at the time, I was working very hard on the property law side, where I was involved in courts for the last... Well, I've been involved in the court system for about 7 years now, but at this particular stage, I was having so much paperwork to do with this. British Gas, unbeknownst to me, decided to start messing me about through payment plans. Now, I was paying direct debit, £60 a month, and when I just so happened to check my bank account one day, because as long as the direct debits are going out and they're not telling me anything, I'm more than happy at that stage. So I just happened to see a bank statement that said British Gas £5. I went, why have they took only £5 a month? And then I looked, and they've been taking £5 a month for quite a while. I thought, I must have overpaid so much. They don't want me being in credit that much, so they've reduced my payments. Well, what happened was they reduced my payments without telling me, but it wasn't because I was in credit. It was just because they'd made a mistake. And then they sent me a £454 bill that they wanted straight away. So I rang them up and I said, what's going on here? I said, you've reduced my payments without telling me. She says, yes, I know, we have made a slight error, but the money does need now paying. So I said, right, I'll set up a payment plan. So I set up a payment plan. They messed that up. They said that they'd not had the payments. So a gas man had come round. I was telling the lad who was reading the meter about this, and he said, that's no problem, that. He said, here, I'll give you this card. He said, now with this card, you go to your local shop, pay £30 every 2 weeks, there's your £60. I went, that would be great. Well, while that's coming through, British Gas ring me up. And this fella says, this money you owe? I went, yeah. He says, could you pay £120 a month? I said, no, I'll pay you 60. He said, right, that's not acceptable. Could you pay £108 a month? I went, no, I'll pay you 60.
I think at this point, Paul, what we should make quite clear is that you were making an offer there and he was refusing your offer, but he didn't really have authority to do that, did he?
No, it's what they do. It's the fear game that they play. That's all these people are. Customer services, it's a very nice way of putting, I'm going to try and put the wind up your ear to put you in fear. This is what the game these people play in. So at the end, he says, what about £88 a month? I said, look, I'm going to pay you £60 a month. Now, you can take that or leave it. That was my offer. And he went, right, okay, well, I'll get back to you. In the meantime, I got this card through, so I'd started paying it. 3 months down the line, everybody's happy. I'm continuing with the civil case that I was in. And then they rang me up again and said, you haven't paid this month. And I went, just hang on a second. And I went to where I keep the receipts, and I picked the 2 receipts up. I said, I have 2 receipts dated such a thing in January and such a thing in January. That means I paid. Oh, right, well, could you put the receipts into an envelope and with a letter and send some... I went, do you know what? Send me a paper bill. I've been studying about it, I've been talking about it. And because of the court case was so harsh, I didn't want to take anything else on, because it's very difficult. It's all right on having this knowledge, but then you've got to find time to stay off work, to go to court, to do all this stuff and do the paperwork. And if you're working full time, don't know about you, Mark, but I don't have a legal secretary that I can just say, go away and do that.
This is what they rely on, Paul, isn't it?
Exactly.
It's our ignorance that they rely on, but our ignorance is often really not our own fault, and that's the insidious thing about this system, especially as it's broken down to create massive fraud. And I've had a lot of dealings with British Gas, and they're basically billing me for services I don't have and I haven't had for years. But get back to your story.
Well, as I said, just send me a paper bill out and I'll settle it. So they sent me the paper bill out, and the first one I tried was something that they call A for V, which is accepted for value. Now, A for V was a very loose mechanism that basically idiots like me and you could use without having to know what all the legal stuff was. It was a process that was used when it was acceptable. But somewhere along the line, Mark, they bamboozled us. They've changed things. They've changed things like the payment check to a payment slip. So even the words make it sound like...
Actually, Paul, yeah, I mean, I resonate with this and I understand it, but there may be people out there who might be a bit lost with what this means. So could you just briefly explain what A for V means, accepted for value?
Yeah, basically what it is, it's the bills of exchange. It's a mechanism for domestic people to use with a bill of exchange, and they don't necessarily have to use it. They can just write accepted for value on it and give it them back. And the agent is meant to understand that and deal with it. Now, I knew that this had been stitched up because they wouldn't accept it. They were talking about this, they were talking about that, and I thought, I've got to tighten it up. There's something that I'm missing here. Now, I even bought something from Argos, which was buy now, pay 12 months. And I tried the accepted for value with them first because obviously I was saving the money up and I was going to pay it at the end no matter what. But I thought, well, I'll try it I've got 12 months. And I spoke to a manager at Argos who informed me that that is a payment that we used to accept, but we no longer accept it. So that was the stitch-up of it. Now, when I got involved with one of my best mates over in Liverpool, he'd already gone to court with Eon. Now, what this was basically over warrants. Now, there's two. We were talking about this before, Matt. There's two separate jurisdictions. There's a civil jurisdiction and there's a criminal jurisdiction. In order to put a pay-as-you-go meter into your property, they have to apply for a criminal warrant of entry. And they do that under the 54 Gas Act, the rights of entry. Now, that is a health and safety issue. So I invited them to come and check my meters and things like this. And this is what starts to throw the jurisdiction. But just going back to the accepted for value, that's the first thing I tried. And they'd applied for a warrant and I ignored it. And I knew that they sent me a letter saying they got the warrant and they were coming. So they turned up at my house. And I had somebody in the house. I was at work and I was just getting back in time at dinner and I was halfway home and I got this call saying, they're here now. I said, hold them off, I'm on my way. And I turns into my street, and in my street there is a warrants officer, a locksmith, a gas man and 6 police officers. So I gets out of the car, I goes walking up, and the policeman has his hands stuck in his flak jacket like that, and he says to me, sorry mate, but you're going to have to let him in, he's got a warrant. And I just said, are you here as peacekeeper or bailiff today? He went, oh, we're just here to keep the peace. I said, then your opinion's not warranted. And I turned away from him and he never spoke again then. The police never bothered to intervene at all then. I just said to the warrants officer, I said, I stand under common law here, this is my property. Should you put a foot on my property or try and gain entry to my house, I will remove you by any means necessary. And the police never bothered. I said, this warrant is in dispute. I said, the account is in dispute. You are not coming in. And with that, he made a few phone calls and said that he was going to be back, but he left. And 2 hours later, the police were still there because I couldn't get rid of the cop because he wanted to know what I was talking about. He was very interested in all this stuff. So in the end, I ended up moving from that property into this new one, and the gas was still in dispute and they're still chasing about it. So they applied for another warrant. So I went to the magistrates with a bundle, which includes things like the Bills of Exchange Act, the Consumer Credit Act 1974, and the Stamp Act. So you build a bundle up along with the letters I'd sent to him, said, come and check the health and safety. Come and check the safety of the supply, because you're applying for a fraudulent warrant otherwise, under fraudulent means. Well, they applied for it anyway, and I turns up at the magistrate's court, and Mr. Ali, for British Gas, says to me, I thought I knew you'd be here today. I went, oh, really? I don't know why, because I never told you I was coming today, but it must just be because of the letters that they were getting. They expected me. And he says to me, you know, I have 200 of these stamped off every week, Mr. Webster. It's probably not even worth your while coming in, but you can come in if you want to. I said, I am coming in. Anyway, I stood in the dock and I said, I paid this bill that is in dispute, I paid through the Bills of Exchange under a non-commercial agreement with the negotiable instruments, as I'm not liable in the domestic property. You are applying for a warrant under health and safety issues, and I said, I've invited you to come and check the supply, and you just don't seem interested. And then I stood out of the dock, and Mr. Ali gets in the dock, and he states, he was my star witness, Mark. He stated, this is not a health and safety issue. We've checked the supply when we read the meter. This is a monetary dispute. To which I just said, thank you, we are in the wrong jurisdiction for this matter then. You know the health and safety supply is fine, yet you're applying for a warrant. What does that say? You are applying for a criminal warrant of entry for a monetary dispute. Can I take you to a court? Can I go to a court, Mark, and get a criminal warrant to enter your house if I claim you owe me £1,000 without proving?
Absolutely. You've just brought up something extremely important there, Paul, that everybody should know about.
Exactly. This is what they are relying on. It's all down to ignorance. And, you know, everybody's stupid until they learn something. It's not about people who are just can't understand this stuff. They don't know it. You know, I would never have took time to learn this stuff. You know, if somebody said to me 10 years ago, here's a DVD on contract law, Paul, I'd go, sod off, will you? Harry Potter's on in 10 minutes.
Well, exactly. And I think that's the thing. But once you start looking into this, if you've got a kind of inquisitive mind and you start realising how the system's been set up, it becomes endlessly fascinating, doesn't it?
Well, I cannot get enough knowledge. If I do on average, I must do at least 5 to 6 hours research a day, including on my days off. I'll be doing it all day. I mean, my Facebook feed is better than the BBC National Service, because I've got people all over the world posting not only their local news but their national news, and you just get everything that's coming together with this. But you see how the corporations now are in bed with the justice system, and the police are virtually just corporate enforcers. That's what
exactly
they're being
right,
used at.
Paul.
But the police are being kept ignorant as well. I mean, I've had police officers say, that's a warrant, he can go in there. I went, no, he can't. No, if it's a health and safety issue, he will get a warrant like that. They will break in because they need to check the supply. You could be the idiot that's going to blow the street up. And that's all they have to say to the magistrate's court. Boom, rubber stamps. That's it. But when that was thrown out with me, the first one, they said that Mr. Lowe, the magistrate's legal clerk, looked through my bundle. He said, I'm not going to be able to go through this in 10 minutes, Mr. Webster. I'm going to have to adjourn it before a district judge. I said, that's fine. He says, it'll be 2 weeks. I said, it's brilliant, superb. And one of the magistrates said, Mr. Webster, have you got a bank account that states there was so much money in it and transferred to British Gas to pay this? I went, no, I paid through the Bills of Exchange. And with the glasses at the end of her nose, she went, Bills of Exchange? And the legal clerk turned around. This was my first glimpse into the teeth that are there in this. Because he spun around in his chair, he said, yes, ma'am, it's a civil remedy we don't deal with in this jurisdiction. Remedy. These people, a legal person does not use, legally trained people do not use the term remedy, because that means cure. So, in other words, I've offered a cure for what they're applying for a warrant over. So it goes before a district judge. Instead of a gas agent this time, I have a man who's in a boiler suit, looks like he's just fitted a boiler, and then you can come to the court and they tell him, yeah, it's job and knock. Issue that warrant and you can, early shoot, get on. And he hands the legal clerk, the court clerk, a letter in an envelope, and I opened it up, and I started laughing because it's the letter that I received from British Gas about 2 months previous, talking about debt avoidance techniques gleaned from the internet and promissory notes. Now, there's a lot of people who try and pay by promissory note for the gas. You can't, because that's under a domestic agreement. They don't accept promissory notes. If you ran a business, they would accept a promissory note, because by the time you've done your accounting and your banking, it might be a few more weeks until you're able to pay it. So they will accept a promissory note, but that's set to be paid by a certain day. Why would you promise to pay for something that in legislation right in front of you you're not liable for? So I went before the district judge and he said, sorry, Mr. Webster, I'm not willing to keep you any longer. There's no paperwork been put in. You've not received any paperwork and nobody's turned up. So I'm withdrawing the warrant and throwing it out. And I thought, well, I wonder where we go from here. So I sent a letter to British Gas stating all the same things about the liability, about the bills of exchange. Again, no answer. 3 weeks later, I go to the magistrate's court again, but with a friend of mine who's going through the same process. And the gas agent saw me, and it was a new gas agent who dealt with me the second time round, because they'd applied for another warrant in between. And when I walked in, I said that, are you legally trained? She says, no. I said, well, I'm going to put you on the stand and cross-examine you. She says, no, you're not. And she put a big X through the warrant and withdrew it right in front of me before we'd even got into court.
Well, that's one remedy, isn't it?
Exactly. So this time, my friend was going, and she saw me, and she started frantically going through a pack. She went, Mr. Webster, I've got nothing for you here today. I went, don't worry. I'm not here for me today. I'm here for this fella. Says he's going to do the same process. Oh, no, he's not. Big X through his warrant. And she said to me, I said, look, is there any way I can get this sorted? I says, your boss legally trained? She says, yes. I says, here, there's my phone number. Get him to ring me, please. She says, I will do. She says, and by the way, Mr. Webster, the magistrates will no longer hear any more applications on your property. It was that simple. So what happens now is, if they still claim that I owe this money, they must take me to court of equity, to a county court, and prove their claim. And they're reluctant to do that, Mark, because I believe that we'll get a test case, and then the bills of exchange will be accepted for everybody who's got a non-commercial agreement. And that's where we've been at. I've been stuck there for 2 years. I've not paid for my gas for 2 years.
There's two ways of looking at this as well, Paul, from their point of view. There's the bills of exchange, and there's also their incompetence. They don't want their incompetence put under proper scrutiny in courts of equity.
Well, this is it. Is it incompetence or is it intentional fraud? Now, the people who come to the court of equity, they're going to have plausible deniability. But if you're legally trained, you must understand this. And if you want a vague, like when you put an act down in front of two people, if we read an act, Mark, the act is purposely written so vague that both of us can have an interpretation of it, and neither interpretation is wrong. But you put that before a district judge, and he can only interpret it factually. There is no interpretation other than the facts. And when the judge gives it, and you say, District Judge, can you explain section 123 to me in regard to a non-commercial agreement and negotiable instrument? And he just blow them out of the water, that's it. So they don't chase us. And people say to me, well, how come they've not just cut you off? I went, because they need a warrant to actually get to your property to do that. Well, my meter's outside. I said, they need a warrant to touch that meter and take it. Once they've got that meter, they've introduced the 86 Gas Act on top of that. Now, in the 86 Gas Act, it does say meters may be changed for a pay-as-you-go meter where unpaid bills are involved. But they can only use the 86 Gas Act to implement that once they've got the criminal warrant. If you take the criminal element away from it, they can't touch your property. If they then claim that you owe them money, they must go through the correct procedure and take you to a county court and prove their claim. And that's where they don't want to be.
That's really fascinating, Paul. I think that's absolutely great that you've done all that research. I can vouch that this stuff does work because I've used it myself in slightly different circumstances. But the Bills of Exchange Act is extremely important in this, and financial instruments and the rejection of legitimate financial instruments is a real problem for these companies. So just tell us where you are now with all this.
Where I am, last contact I had with British Gas headquarters, I spoke to a guy who I asked to put me through to his legal team. He refused, and I said, well, there's a problem here because I've paid this bill. And he was very stroppy with me, telling me that I haven't paid the bill. And when I said, well, are you legally trained? He said, no, are you? And I went, do you know what? That doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter, you don't have to be, they do.
Exactly. I'm bringing a question to you, and you are talking to me like that. I said, I need to speak to the legal team. He said, I'll go and speak to them for you. Could you ring back? So I rang back in 20 minutes. And I spoke to the same fella, but he had a very, very different attitude. Oh, yes, Mr. Webster. I've spoken with them, and actually, they are reviewing your account as we speak, and they'll be in touch. That was July last year. And I've just ignored them. They've just ignored me. I've just ignored them. I've got me eating on. I can't. I wish to remain in honour because the only reason that you send them that bill back under a non-commercial agreement is to zero your account, to balance the account. They've got all these units of gas used and they need to know who's liable and who's not. So you send yours back under a non-commercial agreement and say, oh, that's non-commercial, he's not liable. Oh, we've been paid, we'll send him a cheque to compensate him. And people don't realise the bank gyro, it says bank gyro on the bottom of your bill, on the cheque. But what it actually is a joint gyro credit. And the draw is the commercial bank. That's who pays it. It's from your credit. So what happens is, it's like direct debit. If the commercial bank pay the company, then under a non-commercial agreement, they send you a cheque to compensate the man, because the man must always be compensated. But what they're stating is they're handing me a cheque for, let's say, for £400, and then stating, you owe us £400. Well, if you give me a cheque for £400, Mark, and then as soon as you put the cheque in my hands, you claim I owe you that money, I'm just going to give you the cheque back.
Exactly.
I'm not going to cash it. I'm not going to get... So, have you been paid or not? They won't tell you. They don't want to talk about it. So I don't know if they've been paid and trying to get me to pay again, which we know years ago it was called double dipping, where they were getting paid and they were getting paid again. Yes. But nobody understood it at the time. I certainly didn't understand it. I remember the term double dipping. You're going back 25, 30 years there. But I remember the term, but I didn't understand it, but I understand it now. And the fact is, if they claim they haven't been paid, all right, well, I'll transfer this cheque by my endorsement because it's my cheque. I can't cash it. The post office say that they can't cash it. The bank say that I can't bank it because none of these people are legally trained. They're just told, you don't accept this. You don't accept that. That's a payment slip, which is what I said. It used to say that on the bank gyro, payment cheque. On the joint gyro credit at the top, it would say joint payment cheque. And they changed that one word, cheque, to slip. And as soon as you see payment slip, you think, I'm liable. That's the games that they play. It's all about use of language. It sounds complicated, but it's more what isn't there is what you need to know, if you know what I mean, rather than what is written.
Exactly. And what they're in danger of now is all this getting exposed as massive fraud. And I think that's where they don't want to go.
They're there. We had the lads who I started to help a lad down in Nottingham called Kev, and Kev was helping another lad who I'd introduced to this up here, and he was going to court to represent him tomorrow. Now they've applied for a warrant of entry, and basically they put a massive legal pack together of all my documents, and obviously through research they've come up with some of their own, because I don't profess to know all this. I'm telling you, this is what I did, this is what I used, these are my results, and I stand by my results. But have I won? No. You can't say you've won when they're just ignoring you. But it's a kind of win, so it's like a progression. these guys have now used the Protection from Harassment Act because he's getting harassed for a criminal warrant of entry for a monetary dispute that he's written to them and put into dispute. He sent them letter after letter, which over the time of researching, you tighten them up and you're backing them into corners, and they'll talk about everything other than what you want to talk about, which is, I suppose, what solicitors are trained to do. But it would be nice to be able to speak to somebody legally trained, but I myself have never been able to do it. And because of the letters going into British Gas's headquarters, when the guys got to the court yesterday, it was withdrawn before they'd even got into the building, and they'd expected them to be there as well. Now, the legal pack is useless there, because I kept saying to these guys, I said, don't start talking about bills of exchange or anything. If you get in court, don't bring it up. You're in the wrong argument, the wrong jurisdiction. All you need to do is keep tapping the warrant, health and safety, health and safety, health and safety. This guy took Corgi engineered certificates with him because he's paid £30 to have his meters checked, and he took the certificates. He also, what he did was, the gas agent claimed, I don't know if he's going to be a gas agent come Monday, but he claimed that he'd been not trained, but he'd been advised by the barristers of British Gas's legal teams. And if he had been, because basically all he said was, look, the warrant's withdrawn, and as far as I'm concerned, you must have paid the bill because the warrant's been withdrawn. And he says, well, I haven't paid the bill through cash sterling. I've attempted to pay it through bills of exchange, but they won't acknowledge me. Now, I'm going to put you on notice. And they have witnesses there to sign the notice as well, that should British Gas apply for any more warrants, they will be committing fraud because you've got certificates now that was given to you through the the magistrates. You've got paperwork there now to take back to British Gas's legal team to state that the meters that you're trying to gain entry to are safe. And I even said to him, I says, you could even say, if British Gas would like to confirm it themselves, make an appointment, and if there is anything that they find wrong with the supply, replace like for like, but by no means is the meter being changed. And this guy took the notice, Mark. So he's been put on notice. So now British Gas are right at the cliff's edge now. They're either going to have to jump off and have faith that they can blow us out the water with this, or they're going to walk away from this guy like they did me.
One thing I can say, Paul, is the incompetence that goes on with that particular company is staggering.
It's unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. It's one of the big six, so they say, and not only can you not speak to anybody legally trained, you are actively blocked from doing so. That, to me, doesn't show signs of incompetence. I mean, don't get me wrong, down at the lower levels, you know, it's like Keystone Cops, but I think behind the scenes there, when you're being actively blocked from speaking to somebody legally trained and you've sent paperwork in that they completely ignore, there's some kind of intent going on there. So I think they know that, well, at some point, they've always known that they've been stealing from us. It is our gas. It doesn't matter what supplier, in speech marks, you want to use. It's still your gas. You are still hooked up to it. It's yours. It was given to you when the country went bankrupt many moons ago. The economy is based on the labour. The money is ours. We took our eye off the ball and been distracted by many different things. Governments have cozied on up to corporations for their own personal benefit, and they've sold us down the river a long time ago.
A very long time ago, and this goes back hundreds of years.
Yes.
I don't have time to go into all those landmark dates, but of course the Births, Deaths and Registrations Acts and the updated Births, Deaths and Registrations Act all have things written into them that people should look at, because what they don't realise is that it's not our sweat equity that pays for anything. We think we work to gain payment, but the exchange of labour for any kind of service is how most people look at this, as though that is what's happening, but it's not, is it?
No, it's not at all. The service and maintenance, another argument to get thrown back at me a lot, apart from if I don't pay me gas, that's why their bill goes up. The other argument is that who's going to pay for the maintenance, and people have got to refine that gas. People work in the factories, who's going to pay them? The businesses. The commercial agreements are invited over to this country, and they use our gas, water and electric to entice us in to spend our money. So they make profits by us going into the shop that they've heated and lighted.
That's exactly right.
And that's what pays for it. The fact that they charge us for it is the reason why they make billions of profits. They could still make a profit charging the companies, but it's not going to be what they're earning now. Why would they want to take a hit in the pocket? Look at how all these ignorant people are just giving the money up by direct debit. Do you know what? They're that good to us. Why don't we tell them we'll knock them a fiver off if they pay by direct debit? And they think, oh, look how much money saving. You've got utility warehouses, all these other utility companies called warehouses that have internet, phones, all these coming from the same block. These are private companies that are using your services, not you the other way around. They're your agents. British Gas love to talk to people about me being their customer. That's not what you're there for. You're my agent. Rather than me read my meter and hand my meter reading over, you do it. And you get paid, not from me, you get paid from the credit, but you're getting paid from the credit and then trying to make me pay as well. And we've got to put a stop to that. We've got to put a stop to that, Mark, because I know far too many people, both personally and not personally, that have died because they will not put the heating on because they cannot afford it.
Well, this is an absolute disgrace that everybody should be up in arms about, in my opinion, because
it's criminal, but they're not up in arms because X Factor's on, EastEnders is on, Corrie's on, football. All this money. Why are football players paid £250,000 a week? It's not just because they're that good at football. Because I've seen players on Sunday Park pitches who are as good as some of those players, and they've worked. They've never got anywhere. They like a pint. They like going out with their mates. They never were dedicated to get fit. All that kind of stuff. But they're paid that kind of money because they mesmerise thousands.
That's right. It's idolatry and distraction, bread and circuses. Nothing's changed.
No.
This is really just an extension of the amphitheatre. But
yep.
the problem now is that it's us that are getting thrown to the lions.
Do you know what? We've always been thrown to the lions. We're the ones.
That's right.
Even when Rome was crumbling, they were still having games. They still had the fighting, and while the elite were eating so much until they were sick, and they even had a special room with a trough in where they'd go and make themselves sick so they could carry on eating. The decadence that these elites get into, and you just see the elites are doing the same thing now. They are getting that decadent, but they've always been complacent, but the information has never been available to the likes of me before. We live in an age of information. Ignorance is a definite choice. If you come home from work and watch X Factor and you've worked hard, good luck to you, mate. I wouldn't deny anybody stuff like that. But when it comes knocking on your door, you need to either know this stuff or you need to bend over and let them get on with it. And
that's absolutely right. And showing competence.
Even Rome crumbled from within. All these major empires throughout. You take a pick throughout history. Every major empire has crumbled from within. It's never been an outside force. Why? Because they become decadent, they become complacent, they become power-hungry, greedy, and they kill each other from inside.
Yes, they become incredibly lazy. And the system is just entirely fraudulent now. So they have got a problem. And I think there's going to be a removal of remedy. And I'm seeing this all over the place.
They're trying to
remove remedy. Even, let's take something simple, like a parking ticket. I know somebody several people who have protested the unlawful tickets that have been issued, and they're not giving you a chance of remedy. What they're doing is they're they're taking away the first instance of remedy where you're able to protest it and just sending you the bill. And this is happening across the board because of people like us and what we've found out. But that gives them a major problem in the respect that you can only carry on like that if you're land pirates, and land pirates will have to actually face up and stand there and be counted at some point, because this is being exposed on such a massive scale. But the fraud is on an industrial scale. But the important thing about this, Paul, is it's the government that's letting it happen. The so-called government of this country is basically just a conduit and is owned by these corporations and banks, and they direct what's happening. So it's the government, it's those people in Parliament who are powerless puppets, who are allowing people's doors to get kicked in, who are allowing the elderly to die from hypothermia. They could stop it overnight if they wanted to.
They could definitely stop it overnight, but it is my opinion that there are so many people that if they aren't corrupt in Westminster and Parliament, they are blackmailed, they are held, their feet are held to the fire, and they would either have to be shown as to what they are, or they would end up suiciding themselves and letting it come out. I mean, how many people are we seeing now who's died who are getting burned, and low, medium celebrities are getting burned with all this paedophile stuff and corruption, and it's so rife. This is why you have people, well, I don't vote personally. I stopped voting when I realised that it doesn't matter who I vote for. The agenda's going to stay the same. So I think I should take my concentration somewhere else rather than give... I mean, they're going to take my vote anyway. A non-vote is a vote of some sorts. But the people who they're putting in aren't going to change anything. You cannot get to number 10 in this country without you having dirty hands. I'm sorry, that's a simple fact of it. And it doesn't matter what rhetoric they say. If you can't see through a politician's rhetoric these days with all the information that's out there, then I feel sorry for you.
Well, basically, what should we compare them to as regards what we've been talking about? What you'd say Nick Clegg and David Cameron are very poor lawyers, or basically they're the worst kind of solicitor that you'd meet in a bar who doesn't know what they're talking about, who's trying to blind you with kind of neuro-linguistic program nonsense. And that's really what they are. They're just blaggers.
It is, but they don't even seem to be bothering trying anymore, Mark. It's like, well, maybe it's just me. They just seem so out of touch with things, talking about rubbish. I mean, God, the Prime Minister of England was heckled off stage by Age UK. You know, he was put to the fire by Age UK because he was trying to just give them facts, and then the questions that they were asking he didn't want to answer, just like a typical politician. And people are sick of that. People are sick of having non-answers.
Well, exactly. But all those public
Boris
forums,
Johnson, I believe Boris Johnson got asked a question about being running for Prime Minister, and he avoided the question 16 times. And I always remember the Jeremy not Clarkson. That's because of all those idiots who've been voting for him. The Jeremy Paxman interview, where he had the politician there, and it must have been about 30 odd. He asked the question, and he kept avoiding it, and Paxman kept bringing him back to the same point. This is how ridiculous we've got. People only need to look. I myself always have looked towards America to see where America's at, because 8 to 10 years down the line, when America is sneezing, 8 to 10 years down the line, we're catching the cold. And in America now, they are getting absolutely ridiculous. They're gearing up for all kinds, and people over here will not believe it. In
America, what we've got to remember, Paul, is that America's pretty much ready for martial law. We're ready for it over here. Agenda 21, which I talk about a lot, is basically putting hive communities together which can be monitored 24 hours a day. Now, this is very important because that's
where the smart meters come in as well, that you can operate.
Smart meters, I talked to Deborah Tavares
from your phone and the hive. This is the rhetoric.
Well, that's right. But what people need to know is that the police are being militarised here as they are in America.
Yeah.
If you go onto a London Underground train, you can see an advert for RAF police. Now,
Yes.
in the right-hand corner of that advert, there's a woman with a military police cap on, dressed in khaki. Above that is the normal police in their high-vis jackets in a car. On the left-hand side is barbed wire and the war situation. Now, they're crossing two things here. They're saying that the police are a military force. Now, what are they gearing up for? Why have riot vans been driving around with 2 or 3 police in all over the country since 2012?
Yeah.
With riot shields? It's to get people used to a militarised presence, and this is all coming.
Yeah.
So what you've talked about today,
Climatisation.
yes, what you've talked about today has an awful lot to do with that. And if people don't see what that's got to do with what we've just said, then they need to go back to the X Factor. But what I'd like to say,
Yeah.
Paul, is thanks for your work and your research. You've put it very, very clearly, and everybody should look into this, because the looting is now off the charts and it's going to get worse.
And by the way, that's all linked with the mortgages, credit cards and loans as well. They are facilitating our own credit. They are dipping into our own money, because when they charge you interest, an interest is a compensation. Well, who are you compensating? Them? What are you compensating them for? They've only offered you a service. So if you actually paid a service fee, then who would you be paying the money back to if you're the creditor? The thing is, when you enter a bank and you sign terms and conditions, their terms and conditions, you are going to pay the creditor. Well, that's you. You're the creditor. And as a trustee, they must make the creditor be compensated. So when you don't pay yourself back, they come and take your house.
That's exactly right, and it's happening to more and more people. So everybody needs to do a bit of research here and find out how the financial system really works.
Yeah.
And if we can do it, they can.
Mark, I always tell people, if I can do it, anyone can. I'm an ex-taxi driver, ex-window cleaner. I've got 7 GCSEs and one of them is an F in maths. That doesn't mean I can't add up or take away. It means I don't like percentages, tangents and all that rubbish. So if I can do it, anybody can.
Thanks, Paul. That's absolutely brilliant. Would you come on Windows on the World again to give us some updates in the future?
Anytime you want, pal.
Absolutely great. Thanks very much, Paul Webster. Thanks for being on Windows on the World, and we'll see you soon. Thanks for joining us on Windows on the World. Remember, keep watching those, watching us, watching Windows on the World. We'll see you soon.